Yuval, let me start with you. In terms of what new information technology will do to the geopolitical balance of power, a handful of tech companies as well as governments who have basically been operating on the principle that those who control data will control the world. Talk to us about where this global digital war is headed.
20 years ago, it was a few corporations or entrepreneurs who understood this idea that those who control the flow of data of the world will control the world. About 5-6 years ago, a couple of governments began to understand the same principle, especially the governments of first China and then the US. And now you can say that there is a kind of alliance of governments and corporations against each other, and there are really just two players in the game so far, and they are increasingly dividing the world between them. The question is who controls the flow of data in the world? And it seems that we are in the first stages of a digital Cold War, the same way that we had the Iron Curtain coming down after the Second World War. So now there is increasingly a Silicon Curtain dividing the world. Which part of the curtain you are depends on what code is running on your smartphone and your computer and where the data is going.
Here in Europe, how ready are Europeans to sort of prevail in a world of geopolitical tech competition?
I think that's a huge question, but there's another aspect of that power that I just want to touch upon. Concern for abuse of power by either governments or companies, I think, is heartfelt in Europe, explained by its history of Nazism and communism, where people very directly and recently suffered the effects of repression with the help of information gathered and technologies used against the people. The aims of European regulations are legitimate and in line with the rule of law, democratic principles. But to your point about what that means geopolitically, the EU is increasingly losing relevance in this big G2 world that Yuval just described between the US and its industry and China and its industry. So the EU will have to step up its geopolitical capacity and its growth if it wishes to compete sort of on that stage of both developing standards through regulation, through the market, and through its ultimate willingness and ability to use geopolitical instruments to make sure that those values are taken seriously.
How do you see the regulatory divide as it's happening, for example, between Europe, the United States, and China?
Well, regulation is, I believe in regulation. I think it can be effective, but to be a regulator, you first need to be a leader in the relevant technologies. So for the European Union to be a strong third actor in this game and to be able to exert regulatory influence both over the entire world, but even within its own border, it needs to be a part of the game. And at present, it's not. So I hope that we'll see coming out of Europe not just more regulation, but also more technology, more tools, more innovation. And there is a lot of room for more innovation because there are open niches. We can develop extremely powerful tools to monitor the corporations, to monitor the governments. Just to give an example, to monitor government corruption. And these tools are not being developed, at least not enough, because the main actors are not interested in developing them. If Europe can be a leader in developing these new kinds of technologies, then it will be a much more powerful actor on the world stage. And also its regulations could have far bigger effect.
I think it is crucial to be empowered by the idea that through governance, a lot can be changed. But there has to be a will to do so. And we need to step away from the belief, both in the United States and Europe, I would say throughout the democratic world more globally, that the best way to preserve liberties is by a hands-off approach to the market, because the market is driven by different incentives, by different rewards, profit-driven, shareholder value-driven, than is a society where different rights and interests have to be balanced. It can be at direct odds with the speed of deliberation, for example, of the need to hear different voices, to bring them to the table and to take time to make those democratic decisions.
And also the question is, again, what's happening beyond the borders of the country? Because we unfortunately see many cases in which very harmful technologies are being developed in democracies. And when you look at the changing geopolitical balance of power, much of it is because of the technological changes. And these tools, again, are being now exported all over the world. So this is just an example of how the new technology changes the geopolitical balance of power, whether on a regional level or on a global level. And again, if you look globally, then we see that now you can really buy a package of how to create a digital dictatorship just off the shelf.
It's so remarkable, this example of spyware and the products and services of NSO Group and others that have recently been revealed in this Pegasus project are so illustrative of that dynamic, where this path of companies that work with what is technologically possible directly disrupts core principles, even if they are the stated principles of the governments of the states from which these companies operate.
How can AI surveillance by governments be averted in that case?
First of all, turn it around, survey the governments more. I mean, technology can always go both ways. If they can survey us, we can survey them.
But it's only possible if, one, we have sufficient understanding of how these systems work, so that with the powers that they bring about and that they redistribute, we can design the right countervailing powers, the right checks and balances. So that means access to information and transparency as well as accountability of these systems.